Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Stark Financial Group meeting about the new book for avoiding foreclosures and mortgages. So I'm going to start going through it. All right. So this is basically, I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see it. This is basically the book, my new logo and everything, and I'm doing on these things. And then it's got these cover pages, and then I'm doing a lot of illustrations. I mean, these things got tons and tons and tons of diagrams and pictures in them because I don't know about you guys, but I can't just read a book and know how to do it. Like I gotta have pictures. I gotta like be able to see stuff, right? So this is called the foreclosure defense and equity, right? Everything I do is in equity. I'm not going to teach you anything in law, right? I'm not going to be like, um, I'm not going to be like, um, this is how, I mean, this book does talk about going to court, but I'm not trying to teach you the law, right? How to legally work through everything. I'm teaching you equity. I'm teaching you your administrative remedy, what you can do to fix things or to move things through your life appropriately, not what you can do with a lawyer, right? I don't think we need another class about how a lawyer can help you. So, the foreclosure defense and equity, right? Equity, notice, truth, and remedy. Goes through all the business stuff, the copyright, dedication, disclaimer, the forward. What's funny is like I don't read this stuff. Like I don't know about you guys, but when I read a book, like I have to skip through the first 30 pages because I don't read this crap. But like AI is like this is stuff has got to be in it, right? So it's in it. So here's the table of contents, right? And then part one, right? Foundations of mortgage and foreclosure. So the first part of this, right? The first 50 or so pages is teaching you the history of mortgages and foreclosures and how they happen and why they happen and whatever. So this is part one. Um, Chapter one is the origins of mortgage law. Okay. So let me zoom in a little bit here. Right? So the origins of mortgage law is the historical timeline of mortgage law is ancient and early pledges, right? So there's a reason why that building looks like it's from ancient Greece, right? That's how old banking is. I don't know if you guys have researched this at all. We'll stop this for a second. Do you know who the first bankers were? Does anybody know this story?
I know it goes back to really ancient times. I believe it's a civilization right after the Sumerians that began.
Well,
No,
the
no,
first,
I'm sorry. It was two after. The one that came up with lawyers, and they also came up, I think, with the financial
well,
or started.
The Babylonians are who kind of earmarked this, but
Yeah.
I don't believe, I mean, I know that history says there was a Babylonian Empire, but I think that the the term Babylon or Babylonian Empire is a cover-up, right? I think it's a cover-up for the civilization that actually started everything. And I think it's the Akkadians, right? Because it came from Samaria and then Acadia, and then they said Babylonia. But
Yeah.
there is a esoteric goddess by the name of Babylon, and it's spelled differently, which is interesting that um, why would a Babylonian goddess have the same name but spelled different, right? And they claim it's because this is all Crowley shit, okay? They claim because it's the numbers, right? Because her number is 156. So in order to put the numbers together, you have to use Babalon instead of Babylon. But think about it. What is Babylon? Have you ever looked up the etymology of Babylon?
Well, it goes back to the Tower of Babel and stuff, doesn't it? Babbling.
Baby, the etymology of Babylon is baby land.
Oh,
That's where they
geez.
came up with the birth certificate crap, was in Babylon, but it wasn't Babylon, it was Babyland. But it's the thing is it's all smoke and mirrors, right? So like you, it's like this Babylonian Empire is the Sumerians. It's the first people that wrote things down. It's the first people that had running water. It's the first people that did everything. And the Holy Bible that we read, the Old Testament, is the Torah is the same book, right? And so they did this excavation in southern Iraq, which was Mesopotamia, right? But it wasn't Iraq then, right? It was what we call today Babylon, right? They found 30,000 clay tablets written in cuneiform. Cuneiform up until um, I'm not really sure when, up until a certain time, everything was written in cuneiform on tablets, on clay tablets. So they would have these clay. I don't know if you ever, have seen this, but they would have this wet clay, and then they would use the scribe and they would scribe it all out, and then they would kiln the clay tablets and bake them so that they became hard. So it would preserve the record. This is how long, this is like, they talk about in the Bible 2,000 years, right? Christ, and then 2,000 years before that. So it's like 4,000 years. But these clay tablets in southern Iraq are 12,000 years old, right? They predate everything. And what's interesting is in those clay tablets that they found in southern Iraq is the Old Testament. The creation story is in those tablets in southern Iraq, right? So nobody can tell you that like that the Jews figured this out or the Babylonians figured this out because the Sumerians wrote it down 12,000 years ago, right? So that's how long this stuff has been going on. But the point that I was trying to make with banking is the first real bankers were the Knights Templar, right? And this was they they what they did is they set up a banking system, right? And you could take money in France and put it in the bank. Then you could travel to the Holy Land and you could go to the bank in the Holy Land and you could take the money out. So, does anybody know what the symbol of the Knights Templar is? What's their shield look like? Does anybody know that? So the Knights Templar shield is white with a red cross, right? Does anybody know what flag was flown when Christopher Columbus sailed to America?
Well, wasn't it the Spaniard? But the Knights Templar is the Swiss flag,
The Knights
right?
Templar is a
The
white
Red Cross.
background with a red cross.
Yep.
Okay. So what do they call? So what was the family, the Jewish family were the banking cartel? What is their name?
Orzinis.
Well, they were they no, not the Orsinis. The they were
Khazarians.
Well, they were the Bowers, right? The Bower was what their name was when they came from. So the Orsinis came from Orsin or bear, right? From Mesopotamia, right? And so the other one is the Medici. The Medici came from Mede. Mede is in Persia, right? So back before they had surnames, right? Before the birth certificate stuff, they didn't use last names. They didn't use surnames. It was like James of the, father of John, right? So it was like, oh, I know James, father of John. Like they didn't have I didn't know Jim Jones, right? They didn't have names like that, right? So they would name themselves in the area that they were from. So the Medici were from Mead, the Orsinis were from Orsin, right? And so on and so forth. So the Bowers changed their name, right? So what is the name of the family in the banking cartel?
The Rothschilds.
Right. What does Rothschild mean in German?
Oh, I know
R-
what it means, but I've forgotten.
Red child or red shield?
Red Shield,
Red
right?
Shield.
Okay, so the Knights Templar's shield was white with a red cross, and Christopher Columbus sailed on a flag white with a red cross. And the Rothschilds call themselves the Red Shield. It's all the same. The same people have been running banking since they were in Persia when it was called Samaria. It's the same people, it's the same family. The pharaohs of Egypt. That's how long this has been going. This is how long this has been going on, right? And they just changed the names, right? They just call themselves something else, right? So, the Rothschilds call themselves Rockefellers in America. It's the same people. It's the same thing. It's the same group of individuals. They're all running everything. Yep. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because we're getting into this. This is really getting into like deep banking stuff, right? But it's good stuff, and I'm excited that you guys are going to be able to learn this. So, all right, the origins of mortgage law, the ancient early pledges, then English common law, right? Then courts of equity emerged in the 16th century, which was um, a a chancellor is the extension of the king, right? So basically, when you had a problem back in the kings and queens and the monarchs, you would go to the king, and the king would settle the differences, right? That was equity. He would say, nope, you owe so and so 30 eggs because they paid you for it, right? So that's what the chancellor did. Equity of redemption developed in the 17th and 18th century. Borrowers gained the right to redeem property by repaying the debt after, even after default. So this is something that's really important right now that I'm trying to teach you. The equity of redemption is the most, almost the most important thing you're gonna learn in this, okay? Because it is your right. The right of redemption is your right to come back and retrieve your property even after a default, right? So, what does that mean? That means that even if you are behind in your mortgage, there is a solution, and it's called the equity of redemption. Modern legal frameworks, which is what you see now, banking and credit expansion, that's the 20th century, and then modern mortgage market, which is absolutely insane. If you want to know, if you want to know what that's about, God, what's the name of that movie? I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's it's got Christian Bale in it, and he's like a analyst, and he goes to the bank. This is he goes to Goldman Sachs and he says all the mortgages are going to fail. He's like all of them.
Big Short.
Yeah, that's it. And he goes to all the banks. He says all of them are going to fail. I don't care what you say. You say they're all going to fail. None of them are good. And he's, well, why do you say that? He said because they're blue chippers. He says I done the numbers, and he says there's five good mortgages in each bond, and the rest of them are garbage. And he says, and it's gonna fall out. The bottom's gonna fall out of this. And he said, he says, I want to short the market. If you guys know anything about the stock market, a short is when you bet against the people that have money in something, right? You're betting that people will fail, right? So, if you ever play dice or you ever like go to Las Vegas, right? So, um, most people bet on everything but the 7 or 11. The 7 or 11 is a short bet, right? But it pays like 70 to 1, right? So he goes to the no, and if do you guys know who Goldman Sachs is? Goldman Sachs is like it doesn't get any higher than Goldman Sachs. Like they are the like most prestigious bank in the world, right? And he goes to Goldman Sachs. He's like, they're all gonna fail, and I want to short the mortgage bonds, right? So what happens is that when we all have mortgages, they sell the paper, right? The bank that we get a mortgage with doesn't keep the paper in house. They never do. And I'm going to teach you this. If you read this book, you're going to learn the whole thing, right? That's what MERS is, right? MERS is that how they do this, right? So you sign a mortgage with Joe Schmo Mortgage Company, rip off mortgages, right? And then they go and they sell it in the open market. So the buyers of this stuff, they create what's called a mortgage bond. So they take, 20,000 mortgages and they put it on a mortgage bond and then they sell it. They sell the bonds on the stock exchange, right? So they went out to the stock exchange, they had all these mortgage bonds, and it was God, it was Bank of America, right? So Bank of America had all these mortgage bonds. This guy goes to the bank and they're like, "Oh, so what do you need? What do you need? Like 10 million, 50 million?" I don't remember what the number was. And he's like, 200 million. And they're like, "What?" They're like, "That's a lot of money." And he's like, "Yeah, but I'm not wrong." And they already knew it. That's the thing. If you're watching the movie, right? They already knew it. They already knew that all those bonds were bullshit. So they're like, he's like, "Look, I'm good for it." And he said, "Look, you loan me this money, and when it shorts, like everybody's gonna make out on it, right?" But and then they're like, "Well, if it doesn't," then he's like, "Then I'll pay it." And so they gave him like $200 million to short the stock. And it happened. Like the mortgage that we if you remember this and it was in 95, does that sound right? No, it was 2006 and 2007. The mortgage market crashed, right? Remember interest rates were like a 0.5% or like 1.5%, right? And everybody was like losing their house and it was going great. This is why. This is why is because Goldman Sachs gave this guy $200 million to short our bonds, right? And that's what happened. And so now they changed it, right? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are like doing all this other crazy shit, right? But that's what happened. But do you understand why that happened? Because there is no money, and the only thing that exists is chattel paper. And so they took the chattel paper and they sold it on the open market. They sold your energy on the open market, and then they squandered it. There was so many class action suits at that time because of what they did with the blue chip. They blue chipped the stocks, made it look fancy, and then sold it for really high prices. And they weren't worth nothing. Most of the people were gonna not pay their mortgage. So anyway, that's what that was all about. So that's the modern mortgage deal. So here we go. Equity of redemption, common law origins. Mortgages are treated as transfers of title. Um, Harsh results, borrowers lost property. Courts of equity intervene. Chancery courts looked beyond the contract and to the internal fairness. Equity of redemption is established. Modern application today, this doctrine influences notice, standing upset, assignments, foreclosures, and procedures. This is how and why you can set off a mortgage because of equity of redemption. This is the key to it. Okay. So, mortgages, notes, and security interest instruments. And then we go into banking, lending, and servicing systems. This is MERS, right? So, in case nobody knows, this is how this works, is that when you set off a mortgage, you have to do a 1099 on MERS, right? Because they're the one that controls it. Mortgage securitization and REMIC trusts. So, a REMIC trust is a mortgage trust. You guys all know that a mortgage is a trust, right? That it's not anything else. It's just a trust instrument, and there's always a trustee. And whenever the trustee changes, your paperwork changes with the clerk, right? So MERS assignments and standing, right? So the lender is the originator, and then it goes to MERS registry, and then it goes to the investors and trusts, and then the servicers who you pay, right? So the amount of money that they pay here is less money than this. And so why? Why is the originator able to sell it on the open market through MERS to somebody for a profit that's less than what you pay? How is that possible?
Well, is it because we all put a down payment?
There's that, and there's the fact that there is no money,
Right.
and that they got all the credit from your trust before anything happened. So they could sell it on the open market for $1 and make a profit.
Well, and the truth is they make money 7 ways to heaven on it.
Well, yeah,
Besides that,
100,000.
right?
Yeah.
Insurance, everything.
Well,
So, yes.
well, if you buy $1 million house and you put $100,000 down, and then they take that and securitize it and get 900,000 back. So then they just got $1 million on your 100,000. And then they sold it to somebody else. And why though? Why does America let this happen? Why do the banking laws let this happen? It's not because they're crooks, right? So what's the mechanism? You go and you get a loan, and then you buy a house. That is, you have just acquired a property for your family, right? So that is gross domestic product, correct? So you have just purchased gross domestic product and somebody got paid gross domestic product for that house. So then you borrow the money because you obviously don't have $1 million to pay for a house, right? So you borrow the money for your house and then they get the money for that. And then they do this fractional banking thing. Okay. So what about that situation makes it legal? Like, what about that? What happens to your payment? Let's say you're paying $1,000 a month. What happens to your payment when you pay it? Do they send it back to the treasury?
No, they just keep monetizing everything, don't they?
Right.
They're double dipping.
But why does the government see that as a fruitful effort?
Because under a debt-based system, it keeps the machine going, right? It just keeps creating more debt. And
Well,
that's what keeps
yeah,
our systems going.
but it also creates the environment where they're putting money back into the people, right? Because you make $1,000 payment and then there's $1,000 in there, and then they go and loan somebody 10,000 for a car, right? And then that
Circulation.
yeah, well, it creates inflation. Yeah, it does. Absolutely. But they allow it to happen because it's how we as human beings are the energy generators, and we are to generate and create money. And we're to create money for the guy standing next to us, to the people that we work with every day, right? And so whenever we make a payment, they put that money back into the market. They put it back into people, right? So somebody buys a car, or somebody needs to borrow $6,000 to get a diamond ring for their wife or whatever. And so then they come in and they make those payments, and it just keeps going and it keeps going. But the event eventually what's going to happen is the bottom's going to fall out of this. And they knew that. They knew that, right? They knew that you couldn't do this indefinitely, right?
Wait, and I have to ask questions now. When they do this, though, they do often do a rug pull where they contract the monetary supply, and so they don't lend that money, and then you have stock market failure, or like we had, the Big Short, the mortgage
Well, yeah,
debacle in 2008.
you got trustees mismanaging, right? That's the problem. The system doesn't work perfectly because you got people mismanaging it, right? That not
But they do
they're
that on purpose.
unjust. No, that's not what I'm talking about. There's corrupt people out there that are not managing it properly. But what I'm talking about is the mechanism of what it is. And the mechanism is we go and borrow money and we pay it back. Then they take that money we pay back and they loan somebody else money. And then they get money off the trust and then they loan somebody else money and it keeps going and keeps going. So now here you got the problem is that we're getting to the point, the threshold where the bottom's falling out, right? There's no more inflation to go. There's nothing, like we're just getting to the point where we're paying almost $5 a gallon for gas and silver Morgans are $75 a piece, right? It's getting to the point where it's like, in Bitcoin's making it worse, right? It's not making it better. There's no, all Bitcoin is another stock. It's just another stock sale. And eventually the bottom's going to fall out of that. And you're going to have a whole bunch of people that have, Bitcoin that's worth $800 million a piece that can't sell it. And so then that $800 million Bitcoin is going to be worth zero because nobody can afford to buy a Bitcoin worth 800 million. I don't know anybody, do you? But that's what's going to happen, right? So so the solution in all this, right, is that they have to fix this. That they have to repair what's happening because it's on a downward slope. So what would you say of the things that I've been teaching you is the fix? The something that I've been talking tonight that I keep beating this horse to death. What is the repair to the fact that the bottom's going to fall out of it?
Equity.
Equity and redemption. Your power, if the bottom falls out of it to redeem your property, is the solution. They have to keep that in the laws because if they don't, then it's criminal. Then they're stealing, right? But they're not stealing because they're like, hey, there's a back door. You can go through the back door. If you figure this out, you can keep your house. You can keep your car. When you figure this out, you don't need money, right? And that's the thing. That's why it's there. It's there because, like, how do you think billionaires get out of karma? These freaking people, do you know what they do? Do you know what they do to children? Do you know what they do to people? Do you know, do you know, do you have any idea the things, let's just talk about McDonald's. Do you have any idea what they serve people on a daily basis at McDonald's? How do they do that? How do they do that and get away with it and not get karma? Equity and redemption. That's how they do it. They give you a back door. They give you philanthropy. They say, okay, it's going to cost you $40,000 a year to go to college at Ohio State. And I'm using this for example for a reason because guess who lives in Ohio? The Rockefellers. Guess who owns Ohio State? The Rockefellers, right? So if you're good enough in school, you get a free ride. Good job. Good job, Nancy Barleycorn. You've done a great job in high school, so we're going to give you a free ride. Why do they do that? Why would they give away anything for free? Well, if you research John D. Rockefeller, he talks about it intrusively, about how philanthropy is the key, right? The key to getting out of your karma is philanthropy, is the giving back, right? That's why they do it. That's why they create schools in hospitals and all that crap. That's why they do all that stuff, so that they don't have to eat their karma. They just pass it on to the poor schlep that's an alcoholic that goes into the hospital and can't afford health care. And they're just like, oh, he can't afford health care. Bam, let's put it on him. So that's how it works. That's why they do that, right? This is why you have the option of the equity and redemption is because they already know the bottom is going to fall out of it. The system is rigged, right? Um, Trump said it. The system is rigged. I know. I use it, right? So what this whole thing is like teaching you how to operate within that, how to move within that so that you can get your equity and redemption. It has to be there because the other system, the veil, the fake system that we see every day is fake. The money's fake. Everything's fake. The titles are fake. The laws are fake. They're all fake. Everything's fake because it has to be, because there has to be that illusion there, because they don't want you to know about equity and redemption. So you're like, oh my God, I want a Lamborghini and I worked really hard and I made $72 million last year. So I'm going to go buy the Lamborghini and drive 1,000 miles an hour and have like 15 sugar babies. Like that's why they do that. They allow that thing to happen because they don't want you to know about equity and redemption. They don't want you to know what your solution is. Okay? So let's go to the next one. Judicial versus non-judicial foreclosure. Now, in some states, when you sign a mortgage, some states allow you to sign what's called a non-judicial foreclosure. If you miss a payment, they can just come kick you out. You don't even have to go to court. So there's a redemption there, right? You have an option. They try and kick you out. You file a court case for quiet title. All right. Next one. Chain of title, public recording. This is one of your like most powerful tools, is that they cannot have chain of title, right? So why can they not have chain of title? Anyone? They don't have proper chain of title because in order for you to give them an assignment of the property for a loan, you have to own it first. Do any of us own anything?
Not really.
No, not
Right.
really. Oh,
Right. So if we don't own it, we can't give it. So there's a defect in the title chain, every single mortgage. So you do a forensic analysis, you find the defect, and then you go to court, you file a quiet title. And you win because they can't prove it. All right. Next one. Acceleration and default, trustee sale procedures. Okay, so this is an important one. Okay, payment due, missed payment, default occurs, notice and default of breach, failure to cure. So this is the administrative process that they're doing on you, right? Acceleration of debt, foreclosure initiated, sale and transfer. So again, quiet title. Eviction after foreclosure. So this is the end of it. This is what they do to you. Is they try and evict you because because the truth is like even they get their foreclosure and then what? They got to have the sheriff come kick you out. So they can't do that without a writ of possession. So then they have to evict you. So then you can fight eviction. Most people don't know this stuff, so they don't do anything, right? So that's basically the first part. And then the second one is talking about equity trust and beneficial interest, right? Um, so uh, so courts equity, chancery, equity maxims, trustees, constructive trusts, beneficial ownership, public notice, administrative estoppel and reliance, affidavits of truth, private trust securities, and redemption and cure. So again, it's the same stuff, except we're going into the trust part now about how to do that. How do you use the equity and redemption? So courts equity and chancery jurisdiction, there's one in Tennessee, there's one in North Carolina, there's one in um, Wyoming. So several states have them. Um, Equity maxims and mortgage enforcement. The equity maxims are what your enforcement comes from. So that's why I've given you guys the copies of the equity maxims. If you don't have them, send me a message and I'll send them to you. Trustees, beneficiaries, and fiduciary relations, right? So this just talks what each, so the trustee is the one that holds the property. This is the trust property, that's the house. And then the beneficiary has equitable and beneficial interests in the property, right? So where do you fall in?
You are the tenants.
Right. You're none of these. Isn't this insane? You're not on here because you're the tenant. Okay. Constructive trust and equitable claims, okay? Fraud or wrongful conduct, equity intervention, constructive trust imposed, court case, okay? Restoration of beneficial interest. So, one of the reasons why court cases don't work for a lot of us is because we don't know how to do this. We don't know how to go into a court case and restore our beneficial interest, right? This is beneficial owner versus legal title. Once you get into this stuff, you're going to start to see how they bamboozle you, how they become the trustee and the beneficiary, and you're just a renter. Public notice and preservation of interest. This is your power. Public notice, newspapers, posted at the post office. It doesn't matter where. Just post it, right? Administrative estoppel and reliance, right? So this is how this happens. Once you do the last part, then this is what happens is you create estoppel and reliance. They can't take your property, right? Notice sent, opportunity to respond, failure to cure, reliance and change position, record preserved, administrative estoppel. Okay. Affidavits of truth, declarations, evidentiary record. Again, this is where you create you're doing all that other stuff, but you're creating copies and you're sending them certified mail so that you're creating the record, right? All right. Private trust structures and mortgage claims, property placed in trust, mortgage or lien, fiduciary administration, beneficial ownership, mortgage claim dispute enforcement, right? So when you use a private trust structure, it changes this, right? So redemption, cure, and equitable relief. Okay. Loan organization, default occurs, notice of default, opportunity to cure, cure accepted and loan reinstated, right? Foreclosure proceeding, redemption rights. So they send you an opportunity to cure, and you're like, okay, no problem. Here's my 1099s. And then the foreclosure proceedings and the redemption of rights occurs, right? It, the only reason you lose your house is because you don't enforce the equity of redemption. You don't move into that role. You don't say, hey, I have rights here. I want my equity and redemption, right? And it's not that easy though. It's not like you just call them up and say, "Hey, I'm going to enforce my equity and redemption. Give my house back." You have to do a process, right? This is what this book is designed to show you. Like these first two chapters are kind of long, but I'm trying to teach you why things are happening the way they are. When you get to the later chapters, which I'm going to show you in a minute, it's going to show you why this is different, right? So now we go in to part three, foreclosure sale cancellation process, right? So this is where I teach you how to do this, right? This is called the foreclosure sale cancellation process, right? Initial communication with the server, debt validation, presentment of coupon. This is the presentment accepted for value stuff, right? Then you do the TIGTA escalation, which is an organization. Okay. It's all in here, right? So don't get confused that you don't know what any of this stuff is. This is just a cover sheet. The whole book tells you how to do this. Okay. Then you got to accept and record the deed. All right. Do you remember me a second ago telling you that the reason why all this stuff happens is because there's a faulty title, right? And that if you don't own something, you can't give it away, right? So, if that's the truth and you've never accepted the deed, now I'm not saying you haven't signed the deed. What you did is you signed the deed as the tenant. So when you sign a deed, you're not telling them that you own it. You're telling them, hey, I agree to rent this from you indefinitely. So when you do this next part, is you go in and you file a revocation of power of attorney and you file an acceptance of deed. Once you accept the deed, what happens? We've talked about this before. You go from being what? The grantee to what?
The beneficiary.
The grantee absolute. Once you accept the deed, you are the grantee absolute. And once you're the grantee absolute, their legal title is extinguished. This is the doctrine of merger. This is everything that I've been trying to teach you guys. So when you accept the deed, you become grantee absolute. When you become grantee absolute, everything that they are as the trustee is extinguished. Is the beneficiary status a superior title to legal title? Is there anything higher than the beneficiary? Is there anybody that has more rights to ownership than a beneficiary?
Grantor?
No, nobody
No?
does. The grant,
Oh,
the beneficiary is the true owner. Equity sees the beneficiary is the true owner, right? Nobody is above the beneficiary. So when the beneficiary, if when title is invested in both the beneficiary and the trustee is the same person, then the doctrine of merger kicks in and it's extinguished. Once it's extinguished, then you hold title and their mortgage trust is fuck all.
Wait,
It's
so you're
nothing.
saying the trust is extinguished? That mortgage trust is extinguished.
Yeah, right. Because the mortgage trust is a inferior title.
Okay.
And it's inferior because you didn't own it when you gave it to them.
Wow.
Right? You got to own it to give it away. You can't like this thing here, right? It's a silver Morgan. It's really wore down. It's from 1900 because I like the numbers, right? So 1 and 9 reduces down to a 10, which reduces down to a 1, right? So I carry this in my pocket all the time. I can't give this to you if I don't have it. If I don't have this in my pocket, can I give it to you? So how can I give a mortgage company the right to my house if I didn't own it when it was given to them? So here's something for you. You can go into the closing, and the first thing they're going to do when you buy a house is they're going to slide a deed in front of you, and they're going to ask you to sign it, right? Do you ever notice that the mortgage company isn't involved in that? They're kind of over on the side, right? So why? Why don't they have you sign the mortgage first? Because you can't. You have to sign the deed first. You have to actually be the tenant in order to create a mortgage, right? So you can do this. You can go in, you can sign the deed, and you can write on it, accepted for value. I accept this as grantee absolute, and then sign it and grab your keys and leave.
But will they let us do that though?
What are they going to do?
they'll chase you down with the sheriffs.
No, they can't. They can't. If you don't sign the mortgage, they can't do anything. What are they going to do? They're going to beat you up?
So at that point, when we literally sign that, it's a done deal.
Right? As soon as you sign I mean, does anybody else own it at that point?
No, I guess
Right?
not.
So they can't take it. They can't.
Wow. That is crazy. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So that's why what they'll do is they'll get your wife or your husband. They'll say, if you don't sign this, we're going to take your house. And they usually like somebody caves and ends up signing the mortgage. And all they need is the husband and wife, most states, all they need is one signature. So that's like this stuff is so funny. It's just crazy because it's like how this works. But the thing is that most of the time you can't get your equity in redemption unless you're in front of a judge. Because these financing places are criminals. So keep going so we're not here all night. All right. So then you do the W-4 sandwich because that's your claim. W-4 sandwich is your claim with the IRS. Then you do your public notices, identify theft claims, that's the chain of title, and revocation of POA and rescission, record refusal, workaround. So if they refuse to do all this shit, then you record it on the record. Then you report them to the CFPB, and then you send a notice to the Attorney General. That is this. This is just one process. Understand, there are like 5 processes in this book, right? This is just one. Okay. So debt validation, QRS, initial servicer communication. So basically, this is where you get the presentment and then you deal with the presentment, right? Everybody does this part. Then the next one is recording interest, public notice, and preservation of claims, prepare documents, record with the county, public notice, affidavits and declarations, and so on, right? So you got to make your affidavit and then you got to make it public. So how do you do that? What is the best way that you know how to make an affidavit for a mortgage public?
Either file it with a county
File it with the
or
county. That's right. Create an affidavit, file it with the county. When they ask you what this is for, say this is for 123 Joe Schmo Trail. And then you create the affidavit and you say, I'd like to file this on the record. And they'll take your money and file it as long as it's pertaining to property, real property. Okay. So that's that one. So this one here, revocation of POA, rescission and administrative escalation, identify the issue, revoke the power of attorney, resend signatures, send certified notices, record notices, address refusals, right? Anybody that refuses, put it on the record. Escalate administratively, right? That's CFPB, TIGTA, AG, whoever, right? Some of the stuff you got to research a little bit, all right? So then here's identify the violation, collect your evidence, prepare your complaint. So, W4 sandwich and foreclosure offset strategy. So this one here is prepare the foundation. So this is all one process, right? It's just different parts that you do in this one process, right? So then you get to the end of that, end of chapter, protect your rights and save your home. And this is basically talking about that's what we just did, right? We just went through that whole equity and redemption process, knowledge, notice, record, equity, and remedy. So that is one of them, right? So then we get into here. This is the OID theory, right? So part 4 is talking about the IRS, the OID, third party set off. Okay. So the origins of the OID credit history, traditional accounting, credit creation, institutional expanded theories, and modern claims. So 1099A is acquisition and abandonment of secured property used in lenders to report the acquisition, right? So you're going to correct it. So you guys know that the bank already did a 1099A on your house when you signed the mortgage, right?
Yes.
But who did they put down as the lender?
Lender.
Themselves.
Yeah, that's right. They put themselves down to the lender. They check the box that says that it has to be repaired, and they put you down as the borrower. And how can they do that? How can they file that for you and never tell you?
Because they went and got their money from the federal discount window and then loaned it back to you
Well,
at an interest.
the main reason they can do that is they have a power of attorney. You signed it when you signed the
Oh,
mortgage.
that's right. That's right.
You gave it to them, right? So, any more coffee? So that's one of the reasons that we're putting the power of attorney, revocation of power of attorney on the record. right? Because you're revoking the bank's ability. And here's the thing, this is why this shit doesn't work. This is why most people's shit doesn't work. What do you think that they do is when you start filing 1099s?
They have to pay taxes.
No, they're going to file a correction.
Oh,
As soon as you file a 1099-A, returning it to the other way, they're going to file another one and
oh,
correct it. Why? Because you didn't revoke the POA.
okay.
That's why in my paperwork, I teach you guys how to create a financial power of attorney on yourself so that nobody else can have one. All right. Then we'll go to the OIDs. Okay. Usually report original issue discount for certain debt instruments. So do you guys think that they're doing an OID?
Yes.
No, no.
No.
They
Okay.
don't want to pay tax. They're not doing an OID. They don't want to pay tax on it. They want to keep loaning it. So they do the A. That's it.
What
Acquisition.
if we do the OAD?
We do the OID because we're going to make them pay the tax.
Right. Okay.
Understand this. Your equity and redemption, this is beautiful, right? Your equity and redemption is one concept. Report the tax. There's three things I'm going to tell you right now. Report the tax, report the tax, report the tax. All these people out there telling you, oh, there was no 16th Amendment ratified, and you don't have to file taxes, and you don't have to do this, and you don't have to do that. Meanwhile, they're telling you that and getting you to leave $1 million on the table. My dad used to yell at me all the time. I was a salesman for him. We used to sell mobile homes, and he would yell at me. He'd be like, "You left like 10 grand on the table." Because I just like blow my load right away and I'd want to get a sale. So I'd like discount it 10 grand. And he'd be like, that customer would have paid more money. You leaving money on the table, right? This is what I'm telling you. By not reporting the tax properly on your 1040 or your 1041, you are leaving money on the table. You should never have to pay taxes again if you do it right. That's the issue.
And
Yep.
so we file 1099A, 1099 OID, and then we wait until the next year claim it on 1040.
Yeah, you always have to claim your 1099s on a 1040 because the
Oh,
1040 is the claim form.
okay.
The 1099 is an informational return. The 1040 is the claim form. That's what gets you paid or gets your, like, you're not going to get the equity and redemption without a 1040. So everybody's out there like anti-taxes and not paying taxes, they will never get remedy. The IRS is the key to your remedy. You don't get equity and redemption without the IRS. Do you know why?
Because they're the trustee and they're the part of the
That's
treasury.
right.
They have access to the treasury.
They're the only link between the IMF and you is the IRS. Without them, you don't get anything. You might get the occasional presentment to work, oh, accepted for value or whatever, but you're not going to get what you need without the IRS and the Treasury. Now, all this crap about like Trump abolishing the IRS, he's just going to rename it the United States Treasury. And then everybody's going to be like, oh, Trump brought back the Treasury. Isn't that beautiful? It's the same company. It's the same company. It's the same money. It's the same building. All they did was took the Federal Reserve. I don't know if you've seen the construction. They're taking the Federal Reserve things off the Federal Reserve buildings. They're like, oh, the Federal Reserve is dead. No, it's going to say U.S. Treasury. It's not going to say United States Treasury. It's going to say U.S. Treasury. So is the U.S. Treasury any different than the IRS?
Nope.
It's the same
Still
company.
registered at Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's keep going. So we're not here all night. So administrative reporting, withholding systems, right? So income earned, withholding taken, reported to the IRS, Treasury accounting, credit balances, potential refund and offset, right? They're saying it right here. This is IRS information. Potential refund and offset. That's the remedy. Look at the little IRS thing that AI made in the corner. It's so funny. All right. Chapter 29, Treasury theory set off. Promissory note created, right? We already went through this with the BPNs. Institution monetizes the note. Treasury and systems record activity. Institution receives benefits. Borrower seeks set off or credit and claim for discharge and reconciliation. So this is the part that nobody does. Everybody's like throwing 1099s at the IRS like they're going to go out of style, but nobody does this. What's that? What is part 6 of that slide? What is that talking about? What's the reconciliation?
Equity? No.
1040, a
Oh,
claim.
10-4.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the claim, right? So you're going to put a claim in, and that's where people miss. They're like throwing all these 1040s, but they're not putting it on the claim form. So the IRS is like, well, we're ready when you are, right? And then if you can't get the 1040s to work, then you file a court case at the U.S. Court of Claims, right? All right. IRS enforcement audits and legal risks. Okay. Information return filed. IRS receives it. System flags issues. Review for examination. Action taken. Important truth. IRS information returns are legal tools for specific purposes. They do not discharge debt, create refunds, or provide offsets unless supported by law and accurate reporting. Okay. This is where I'm telling you is that like you can't just throw paperwork at the IRS. You got to collect your documents, you got to do your 1099s, and then you got to file your 1040, and you got to do your 1040V and your 1040ES, and then you got to back all that up. And when they send you letters, you got to make sure you're coming at them as not the taxpayer, and you got to make sure you talk to them right, but you got to give them what they need because they're your trustees, right? So that's what this is talking about is doing that part appropriately. So part 5, this is another process, okay? This isn't what you do in addition to all that other crap. These are different processes. So part 5 is the UCC one. So commerce requires order, freedom to contract, notice, secured party, priority is determined, preservation is protected, okay? So basically what you're going to do is you're the debtor, the secured party, and you have your security agreement, UCC 1 filing. So everybody, you guys all understand this. This is the SBC, secured party and creditor process. That's what that book's about. That's what this is you're creating a security agreement in the UCC. So that's what allows you with the security agreement to come in and do this. Okay, so why? Why, when you file or you sign a security agreement with the bank, can you file a UCC?
Because you have equitable interest in whatever you're agreeing on.
Right, because there's two people, right?
Yeah.
Customer
Legal
lender,
you.
customer borrower.
Yeah.
You're not filing a UCC as the customer borrower. You're filing a UCC as the customer lender. You're saying, yep, you're right. That guy over there owes the bank money, but you owe me. And I'm foreclosing on you. That's what this process is about, is creating a foreclosure on the bank. I'm pulling my bond. I'm pulling my support on you, right? So here we go. Uniform code explained, right? What is uniform code? Um, per, promotes uniformity, defines rights and duties, supports commerce, provides legal protection, creates stability. Article 1, general provision, scope, good faith, notice, and definitions. Article 3, negotiable instruments. Article 9, secured transactions. And then it's talking about all the other articles. Now, you don't have to read the UCC, right? But you need to understand how it works, right? So the UCC works in commercial transactions is parties enter into a commercial agreement, rights and obligations are established, the UCC rules apply the transaction, enforcement rights are protected, disputes resolved under UCC provisions. So this is what you're doing is that you're filing paperwork for your equity in redemption. Understand every single process that I'm showing you tonight or any other time about mortgages is under one concept, equity and redemption. It's how you are putting the power to the pavement for the equity and redemption. Okay. Article 1, reservation of rights, right? The power of reservation of rights. You don't have to write reservation of rights. You are reserving your rights. Okay. But here's the problem. When you sign a document and you write underneath of it UCC 1308, are you still under the status of the beneficiary? When you quote statutory law, what person can you only be?
Trustee,
The
right?
legal person is the only thing that you can
Yeah.
be if you quote the UCC under your signature, right? Because do laws apply to human beings?
Nope. Only
Right.
natural and universal.
Right. So that's the big mistake. Don't put UCC 1308 under your signature. I took all mine off. I used to do that all the time. That's why they laugh at you and they don't respond to your paperwork because they're like, "Well, he's just a taxpayer. We don't care. He used the UCC on it."
What I do, I still put like without
Okay.
prejudice, all rights reserved, without UCC. Just a statement. Does that work?
I mean, you can put it down there, but you don't have to. You just have to be the right status. Like you don't have to write it. If you write it and you're still acting belligerent, then you're not that, right? Um, so why this all matters in disputes. Without reservation, rights can be lost by silence, payment, and participation. All right, so this is something that I want you to understand. Why, if you write without recourse, does that save you?
Well, that statement basically means that they can't go back and force you to perform.
Yes. It's because it's back to capacity. What status are you signing in? Like they always say, qualify your signature. Qualify your signature. Don't just write. And in a court case, don't write executor. Like you had a bunch of people saying, oh, be the executor. You don't want to be the executor. You don't want to be the trustee. You're the beneficiary. I am the non-surety beneficial interest holder. I am not the trustee and I am not the executor. Right? Executor of what? I collapsed the estate. Like I'm not, all they have to do is get me to say I'm the executor so they can open it back up. Right? This whole thing, if you do it right, it collapses the estate and it makes you a living revocable trust. So what do you think happens as soon as you say you're the executor? They're like, "Oh, wait. Boom, you're open again." So scary person. You're the surety. Go to jail. All right. Enough on that one. UCC3, negotiable instruments, right? We've done a ton of classes on this stuff. Promissory notes, checks, drafts, money orders, certificates of deposit. Those are all negotiable instruments, right? UCC9, secured transactions, okay? You got the agreement, the attachment, which is the property, the perfection, right? All right, so UCC9. Um, all right. So secured transactions, debtor, security agreement, secured party. Um, so key elements of a secured transaction is security agreement, attachment, collateral, perfection, and financing statement. That's the UCC1 form. That's called a financing statement. So basically, you're changing the priority and you're using a UCC to do it. Okay. Debtor, creditor, secured party theory. Okay. Transaction on agreement, obligation arises, security is granted, performance or default, enforcement rights. Okay. So key principles that govern the debtor, creditor, secured party relationships, consent and agreement, value and consideration, notice and communicate. Here's the key. What consideration did you get? Right? What consideration did you receive? Did somebody show up at the closing with a wheelbarrow full of money? No. So there is no consideration. So that's the issue. Is what are you doing? You're going to enforce the contract that's in place, which is consideration. Since you didn't provide any consideration, you can't take anything. The taxpayers provided consideration, right? So in this situation, like this stuff is important, right? In this situation, what do you do? What would you file with the IRS on the UCC1 process? A B, right? Because the B is what secures, the B is what creates the promissory note that the money was created. Right? So they're like, "Oh yeah, you owe us $100 million for this house, or you owe us $4 million for this house." And you're like, "Okay, that's fine." So then you do a B, and then you do, so instead of using the A and the OID to correct the record, you're using a B and the UCC1, and you're creating the money that they were supposed to create. Right? So you're putting a claim on that money. So you're using a B, and then you're going to use what other instrument you need to like move money around. Right? You're like, "Okay, well, you didn't correct the record, so I'm gonna. So I'm gonna do a B, and I'm gonna do a miscellaneous, and I'm gonna send the finance institution the money, and then I'm gonna keep my house." So there's that. So then part 6, this is usufruct. Now, this is different. I'm not a big fan of this, but it works, right? So the usufruct is interesting because All right. So in the Bible, the original grantor of the earth is God, right? So God is granting you the earth for whom?
His people.
Right. So who that's the beneficiaries, right?
Yep.
Right. And so you're the legal owner, right? So you would be the trustee at that moment, and your children would be the beneficiaries, right?
Okay.
So you don't own it. So God owns the world, and God granted the world to the beneficiaries, which are your children, and you're allowed to stay. So one of the issues with that is that you're allowed to stay as long as you don't destroy it, right? A good example of what usufruct is the apple tree in the yard is not owned by you, but you can pick all the apples you want off of it. You can eat from that apple tree for the rest of your life, but you can't screw up the apple tree. Right? So that's what usufruct is that somebody is giving something to somebody and you are making sure that they're getting what they need. It's your job to make sure that your children get an occasional apple to eat so that they have nourishment, right? So that is the usufruct kind of framework, right? So how does this work in a mortgage, right? So God gave his people the land, and he gave the land for the beneficiaries, and you're allowed to live there. So they can't evict you. They can't kick you out under the order of usufruct because it's been granted by God. They can't take that away from you, right? In essence, if you ever have issues with family court, you need to learn this because this is why they can get away with what they get away with. Is because in the framework of usufruct, they have control of that because God has granted them as trustees to have control of it for the beneficiaries. The beneficiary is your children, not you. You're a co-trustee with the court. You're the next friend. You've heard that term before, right? So that's what this framework is about. Possession, use, and beneficial enjoyment, right? I just went over that with you, right? Is that you're allowed to possess the property, but you can't damage it because it's for your children, right? These arguments have worked in court, so I'm not just being crazy here, okay? So, equitable occupancy and constructive lease theory. In other words, you are leasing the property for your children, right? So common basis for equitable occupancy is permission or allowance to occupy, investment in the maintenance, reliance on representation, long-term, continuous, and open use, and the payment of expenses and taxes and utilities, right? So this is the idea that you're doing all these things, right? And that's what gives you the right to be there, is that you're taking care of it for the beneficiary. So trespass, proof of claim, and voluntary transaction 30. Okay, so what is a trespass in this context? No authority, right? The proof of a claim is no claim is valid without proof. Standing of the party must provide. 3, voluntary transaction theory. All binding obligations require voluntary, knowing, and informed consent, right? Why these theories are used, okay? Protect against unlawful actions, force verifications of claims, preserve rights and objections, create a record of dispute, prevent presumption of liability. So that's what you're doing in this situation here, is that you're creating this environment where um, they don't have a valid claim. They don't have standing to have a valid claim, right? The IPID framework explained interference, unlawful, unjust intrusion, encroachment, exceeding boundaries, disruption, actions that disturb and obstruct or impair your peace, notice, providing clear written notice, and last, equitable responsibility, seeking fair and just and equitable resolution, right? Purpose of the I, this is what it, usufruct, it's IPID, right? Reassess your rights and standing, create a record, demand proof, provide opportunity, establish equitable accountability, and preserve evidence and remedies. So this is what you're doing in this, okay? As you're creating the record. Equity, accountability, and administrative remedy, right? So then what you're doing while you're doing this is you're creating that administrative remedy. You're doing your challenge presumptions, demanding accountability, preserving your rights, promoting equitable resolution, empowering informed action. Okay. So now this last part here this is talking about litigation, right? So I have not seen too many people accomplish this without going to court, right? So most people have to, on some version, take this to court. You got to file for quiet title or something like that. So this section is designed to kind of cut your teeth on this, right? About what court is, okay? So first of all, standing in real party of interest, right? Um, it's important that you explain to them in court what your standing is. So, right, you can't come at them as the person. The person doesn't have standing in a mortgage. The person owes the debt. So you can't come at them as the person. You have to come at them as the real party in interest, right? So the real party in interest is the one that loaned the money, right? So if you're talking about the pecking order, who is on the top of the chain of who should get the property, right? Who is the secured party? It's not the person. The legal person is not the secured party. So the secured party is the real party in interest, right? The person that loaned the money, the individual that they got the money from. That's the real party in interest. So all you're doing is saying, look, you're just a securities intermediary, and I'm pulling your rank, and I'm saying that you owe me the money, and so I'm keeping the property. This is what they don't want you to do. They don't want you to know this stuff, right? So you are the real party in interest because you are the secured party. Real party in interest. Why is a real party in interest? Because you're the secured party. Why it matters in foreclosure, prevents entities from no ownership or authority from foreclosing. Who is and is not the real party in interest, right? The original lender is the owner. The original lender is not the bank. The current owner is the holder of the note. The valid assignee of the note with rights, the trustee with proper authority, right? This is who is the real party in interest. Who is not? Loan servicer is not the real party in interest. Debt collector is not real party in interest. Trustee is not the real party in interest. MERS, any party without the right to enforce the debt. None of these people are the real party in interest. You are, right? Key rights of the borrower. You have the right to demand proof of the foreclosure party or the RPI, right? So here's how you do this. Review the complaint, demand the strict proof, examine the evidence, file a motion, request discovery, argue the facts, seek dismissal, right? Discovery is the most important part. This is why people this is why people get messed up on this part of it, right? Is because they don't know procedure. So there's a lot of ways to do this. You can buy a book about mortgage procedure, right? Or you can do what I'm telling you to do with your AI and create an environment where your AI tells you what the procedures are. Or you have to hire a lawyer, but lawyers aren't going to do this for you, right? You got to do this on your own. So this is the thing, you're going to have to learn the proper procedure for mortgages. That's the real party in interest. Debt validation, accounting and discovery, right? So this is what when we do, we say, I'm making a demand for full accounting, right? So that's your discovery. Full accounting, know your loan, protect your rights, right? What is full accounting? Why is full accounting? What should I include? Your rights. So this is all here for you, okay? And then motions and objections, okay? So, all right. Is the court alive? So the court's not alive. It's an artificial entity. So if it's not alive, then something alive has to move it. And in order to move the court, you have to submit a motion. That's what a motion is. A motion is how you move the court. The only way to win a court case is to properly move the court. Procedure, the law is irrelevant. Laws just give them the fulcrum that they need. But you cannot win a court case with the law. You can only win a court case with procedure and motions. Okay?
That's why the attorneys are learning civil procedures and federal criminal procedures so that they can know how to act in courts.
Yep. So here's a whole slide about motions, how to move the court, right? Motion to dismiss, motion to compel, motion for summary judgment, motion for preliminary injunction, motion for limine, motion for strike, motion for extension of time, motion for reconsideration, right? Injunctions and TROs, you're going to have to do this. You have to file a temporary restraining order against the financial institution in order to not get evicted, in order to not get kicked out of your house. So this is a very important part of this, okay? So a TRO, this talks about what it is, prepare your papers, file with the court, ex parte request. That's a motion, right? Motion for ex parte, right? Judge's decision, TRO issued, serve the other party. Full hearing, extension or dissolution, right? Quiet title. I've been talking to you about this all night. This is what a quiet title is, right? Quiet title, clear ownership, protect your property, right? The quiet title process, investigate, file a complaint, serve the notice, answer the response, discovery, hearing, trial, judgment, record judgment, right? So quiet title is, understand this, that their color of title is loud, right? So how do you, if you are trying to assert your position over theirs and theirs is loud, what do you need to do? You have
You
to
need to get
quiet.
quiet.
You have to quiet the title. Once you quiet the title, then their loud shit is irrelevant, and the only thing left standing is you. That's what a quiet title is. That's why that's important. Trial strategy and preparation. This goes through all that. Settlement. This is what's going to happen, right? They're going to settle because they can't win. and they're going to settle in mediation. Conclusion, this is going to go through all the topics here. This is a really important part. This is a really, really important part. I want you guys to study this part in the book, this litigation part. And it's going to get overwhelming, but understand that there's a solution for you, right? You got to know the equity maxims. You got to know what equity is. There is no remedy for you at law. You cannot go in to a foreclosure court case and argue the fucking law. You will lose. You will lose because you don't have fucking standing in the law. Do you know why you don't have standing in the law? Because the laws are written for them. The laws are not written for people. They're for the banks. You don't have standing. You're just a person, right? You're just a legal person. You're not even a real owner. So you can't come in law. You have to come in equity because in equity is the only place where the beneficiary is recognized. This is where the biggest freaking problem people make in this movement is they're like, oh, I'm the beneficiary. And they sit there and try and, and get remedy. And there is none. There is none in for the beneficiary at law. There is only remedy in equity for the beneficiary. So here's more about courtroom defense, right? So here's part 8. This is just talking more about trusts, right? Trust, estate, and private remedy structures. This is how to use your trust to do it, right? Common law trust structure. This is stuff that I've been teaching you all along, right? How to create a trust. This one is grantor, trustee, beneficiary, purpose, right? So here's a secret I'm going to tell you. Once you get your house paid for, create a trust. If you live on 123 Albuquerque Lane, create a private trust called 123 Albuquerque Lane and then fund it with the house and put the house into that trust and then make that trust the owner of another or make that trust the res of your other trust. Don't own it yourself. Don't put your fucking name on it. Create a trust just to own the house and then take that trust and put it in the res of your other private trust. That's how you save shit. That's how you keep from losing shit. Is by using your trust environment, your private remedies through trust. Once we get through 3 years of tax returns, you stop using the 1040 and you use the 1041 and you use a string of trust so that you can be the foreign grantor. Right? And you put all this stuff in trust. That's what this is all about. So private express trust, this talks about that right here. Foreign trust and concepts of asset protection, why and where and how to use the foreign trust. Business trust and mortgage interest. This is my forte. I don't use the other stuff. I use business trust. I use Massachusetts business trust to hold my properties. Well, they're not mine, they're the family's. Trustee powers and administrative authority. And that's it, right? This is the conclusion. All this happy family around their home. Okay. 9 is just the conclusions and of all of the definitions and things like that. Okay. So that's the book. That's it's long, right? It's like 201 pages, and plus it's going to have another volume that's going to have all the templates in it and stuff. But start studying this book because your birth certificate, your interaction with your birth certificate is a fucking mortgage. It's not anything other than that. They are mortgaging you through your birth certificate. It's not all this other stuff. And, everybody in this movement is talking about, oh, they're doing this and they're robbing me and they're thieves and they're not doing that. They had you mortgage yourself in the birth certificate. So if quiet title is what you do to save your house, how do you quiet title the birth certificate? You guys know? Well, you can't complete an imperfect gift. So the first thing you have to do is perfect it with the certifications. So once you get it authenticated with the state and the federal government, then you have a complete title and then you have ownership of it, right? Because you have everything. So then what do you do? How do you quiet the title? Send it back. Send it back to the registrar and say, "Thank you. I appreciate everything you did for me. I got it from here." Right? So that's all we're doing. This movement is a fucking mortgage, and I'm teaching you how to quiet the title so that you can have merger. There's only two things that happen in the financial world: mortgages and marriages. Mortgages and mergers. A marriage is a merger. All you do when you get married to a woman or a man is you merge the estates. Your estate and their estate becomes one. That's what a marriage license is. That's why it's so hard to divorce, because what a judge has to do in a divorce is he has to separate the fucking um the estates, right? But I'm teaching you how to collapse the estate. So then when you get married, what you're doing is you're just merging living revocable trusts, right? So that's why this is so important. This section, over and above dealing with your house, it's everything. Everything that I'm teaching you, everything you learn in this movement is about mortgages. Because once you go to a courtroom and they put your birth certificate up, it's called subrogation. That's a mortgage. They just mortgaged you. Now you have to perform. Does that make sense? All right, throw me some questions.
Yes, it makes sense, but I was viewing a video where they were saying that we all have been committing perjury because we were using our original birth date and not the file date when we received our birth certificate.
Yeah, so the forgery that you commit is the name. It's not your name. It's a game piece that they've given you to use. It's not yours. So it's forgery and it's fraud. That's how they get you. That's why every time you go in the court, it's always guilty because they see you as fraudulent. But when you step in and say, I don't want that name, I want to name my own, like I'm teaching you to do, then you're not that. That's how you unmortgage yourself, right? Because you got one name that's a legal name and you got another name that's the equitable name, right? And they're two separate names, right? So when you joinder the equitable name and the legal name is extinguished. So the only thing left is the equity. So when you joinder that, you're no longer committing fraud. The use of the estate is
Oh,
fraud because it's not your estate. They made it for you.
okay.
So that's what I'm teaching you. I'm showing you how to do this. That's what we're doing this through trust and all this other paperwork SBC and all that stuff. That's why we're doing it. So read the book, right? I gave this to you. I'm charging other people 1,500 bucks, but you all get it for free because you're in the program. So read the book, right? We're gonna have more meetings on this, so don't worry, right? We're gonna have lots more meetings on this.
Mm. Mm.
But because this is it. The reason why, like I had people like almost 3/4 of the way through this, and I moved everybody back to the beginning because we weren't connecting, right? And the problem is that like I get this stuff because I've been in banking and I've been selling houses since I was knee high to a grasshopper. I get this shit right off the bat, but y'all don't. And it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you haven't worked in banking your whole life, because you haven't worked in this stuff your whole life. So what I did is I went back to the beginning and started over and created this situation so that people can come through and learn all this stuff through these different modules, right? So now we're going through this again, and these books that I'm rewriting are just really, they're really opening it up, right? I'm really teaching you guys are able to like grasp something a lot better, right, than anything that's ever been put out there before. Nobody's putting this shit out there the way I am. Nobody is, right? And I got all these gurus like attacking me. They don't like it, but I don't care because I want you guys to have this information. I want you to be able to succeed, right? And so that's why I'm putting it out there. So, you guys got any more questions? You good, Pedro?
I am, and I have so much appreciation for you. I just want to make sure that I'm around every time you speak.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, man.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I've
know,
been in
'cause-
this space, like I told you, for a solid 5 years, and you are doing exactly what you're attempting to do. You're filling in the gaps, big
yeah.
time for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like that's all I want to do. Like I'm not everybody's like your stuff. I'm like this isn't even my stuff. This isn't even my content. Right? I learned 90% of this from Rourke. And if
Right.
anybody's just followed these circles before, they know who Rourke is. Rourke is the pioneer. He's the only one that got a full accounting. Right? Everybody says they got this and this and remedy, and some people have gotten some money, but nobody has gotten the success that Rourke has, and nobody has gotten the success that the other one is Phelps. Phelps is the guy that did all the name change shit. So I'm going to show you like 3 different ways to create these trusts. Phelps created it through a court case. He didn't do all this paperwork shit. He went to a court and he got in the chambers. And he was done, right? That's the thing with this is that it's not there's 1,000 ways to do this, but what I want to do is I just want to take the information that's out there. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to show you guys how to put it together, to fill the gaps in, right? And so now with this book alone, if you study this book, you will know how it works. Because this book alone shows you everything because everything is mortgage.
Right.
Everything, right?
I think what you're doing actually is teaching, and that's what others aren't actually doing.
No,
You're teaching.
everybody else is trying to get likes on Facebook.
Well, or the dollars, whatever it is, but you're actually teaching it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing, because that's what I'm called to do,
Right.
right? I do what God calls me to do. I don't do what people want. I do what God wants me to do. God wants
Well,
his
that's my
people to
that's
know.
my character. I've been a teacher my whole life, so that's why I recognize it in you.
Well, I appreciate it, man. That's great. So that's what's going on. Study this book, and we'll do some more. We'll do some more on this when I get the second volume done with all the which should be in a couple weeks. I got court next week, so I got to go out of town, so I won't be back until the following week. But I'll get the volume 2 done, so you guys have all the templates, and then we'll go through this again. Once you can see the templates, it's gonna make sense to you. So. Also look for that administration book for trusts. Like I'll have that done within a couple days, and then I'll share that with you guys. So, all right,
Awesome.
all right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much.
listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful day or a wonderful night, and God bless you.
Have a great week. Talk to you soon.
You too, likewise, Ken.
Yep.
Thank you,
Take care,
Ken.
William. Bye, Alex.
Bye, everyone.